Welcome back to another edition of Check Call. Don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter on FreightWaves.com if you haven't already. Today we welcome back Joe Orr from the NMFTA. Welcome back, Joe.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
We've had you on a lot recently, which is fantastic because you guys have done a lot in LTL reclassification, and you guys have also recently just come out, not necessarily come out, you held an event. Let's be honest. You didn't come out with anything new. You held a really cool event on cybersecurity. It's kind of really one of the only of its kind. Do you mind breaking it down for us? Give us some highlights from the event, the good things, the bad things, and maybe some trends that you saw in the space.
Yeah, and I think we did come out with something a little bit different. I mean, each year we try to change it up. Last year, it was really focused on hearing from the peers, hearing from people in the industry, which was something a little bit different. So that worked really well. We also did tabletop exercises last year. That worked really well. So we continued that theme this year, but then we added cargo theft this year because we know that that's an up and coming trend. And a lot of people think, oh, well, cargo theft, how's that related? At NMFTA, we don't focus on the whole big thing of cargo theft. There's the physical aspect of it, but then there's also cyber-enabled cargo theft. And that's where they're getting compromised into the system, the double brokering, and pieces like that. So we really focus on the cyber-enabled cargo theft. So that was one of the themes. And so, it was a really exciting event this year. We had a lot of participation, a lot of good conversations. So it was a 2-day event, and it's the only cyber event focused on the industry. So it is a one of a kind. I know we said that, and I looked it up last year because I was like, hey, is this true? And it really was true. And it still is. The first day, we started it off with a keynote speaker, and it was somebody that was from the armed forces that focused on cybersecurity and just talked a lot about best practices, some of the upcoming trends. And then we did a lot of focus. The first thing was hearing from the carriers, the brokers on cargo theft. How does it affect them? What are the lessons learned? And that was pretty tell. We heard a lot of great lessons. Some of them are about, we're all going to paperless, but sometimes you still have to pick up the phone and do verification. We heard stories about how there's people that are working with these brokers that will carry 4 or 5 loads to earn the trust. Then they'll get that high value load, and that's the one they're aiming to steal. And so they're becoming a lot better at things. Of course, we talked about the big heist with Sammy's Tequila. We talked about Shaquille O'Neal had a car stolen. That was all through access of the system. And we talked about some of the best practices, like how you onboard your employees, how you offboard your employees. We also, of course, NMFTA does a lot of research. So we brought up some of the researchers, and we talked about some of the projects that we're working on. Some of these projects have gone really, really well. Some of them haven't gone as perfect, but we talked about, some of the work we're doing with the ELDs and some of the ELD providers and what we're doing to make sure that those are secure. We also did an executive roundtable, which I thought was really good, where we talked to, folks from different parts of the industry. So we had somebody from tanker, we had somebody from long haul, somebody from LTL, and we talked about, what are the cyber challenges? And that was really telling because while the industries are a lot different, the cyber challenges are very similar. And so we talked about, how do you protect yourselves? Every session ended with, and it wasn't our intent, but every session ended with a discussion on AI. And I think that's the big thing that's coming because AI is not only used for cybersecurity, but it's used in operational efficiency. So we talked about, how do you onboard your vendors? And that includes your AI vendors. And then the second day, we did, of course, some hands-on activity, like how do you prepare for the worst? How much downtime can you actually afford? And then we did a breakout session where we talked about ELD. So it was just really hands-on, and we wanted people to walk away with this from the session with something they could take back to their company. And you had mentioned, the big theme was cybersecurity is a team sport. And I think each one of the sessions also really focused on that. One person stood up and said, hey, if somebody else can go through the pain and share that experience and prevent me from going through the pain, I'm all for it. And I'm going to do the same thing. So one of the things that NMFTA uses this for is sort of a call for collaboration. Help us create our roadmap. What should we be focused on? So we talked about things like a fusion center, ways to communicate out to the industry. What can we do differently, or what can we do that you're not getting right now? So we did a call for collaboration that I thought was extremely valuable also.
I think that collaboration call is it's such a unique place that you guys have. You have everyone come in, you have that environment where you guys kind of are a neutral third party, right? You guys aren't, out there trying to get all the shippers and win all the freight. And you're not out there trying to, get the best drivers. You guys truly are that neutral third party that says, we want to provide the resources that can help the industry grow and move forward in the best and fastest and safest way possible. So it's really a fantastic thing that you guys have created where it's like, yeah, we want you to come share your stories. We want you to come tell us about what's going on, whether it's a scam that you almost fell for or a scam that you did fall for, or, someone's sister's cousin's brother's friend said something about it. It's taking those steps to say, we really are all in this together. And just by sharing your story, it doesn't necessarily mean that you've done a bad job or whatever. It's that the criminals and those bad actors really are getting smarter, getting sophisticated, investing in those longer, at the risk of sounding like I'm from a heist movie, they're in the long con, they're there to get those couple loads and then get the highly profitable one at the end. So it's not just a quick turn. They're really kind of investing some time and effort into this. So I really like that you guys have created that area for people to come and share those stories and say, hey, this is what's happening to me. This is what we've seen. These are the bad actors we found. That just kind of lets people know that, you're not necessarily alone in it. It's happening to everyone. And you guys are really trying to develop those resources and be on the front lines for, making it and hopefully having a solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the cargo theft perspective, you're right. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. Everybody's impacted, no matter what size you are. They're getting smarter and smarter, and they're with AI, they're getting more sophisticated. And so, when you hear some of these stories, you look back and you say, well, how could you have prevented that? And sometimes the answer is, I don't know. I don't know how I could have prevented this. And I think that's the most frustrating part is, you could be talking about $500,000 worth of cargo and they're trying to figure out, okay, how can I prevent it? So we had lots of discussions about, okay, to the folks in the room, how could you prevent it? And it really sparked some really good conversations. And then when it comes to cybersecurity, one of the sessions we did was called When Seconds Count. It used to be when somebody infiltrated your network, they would sit for months, they gather data, then they'd act upon that data. With AI, they do things so fast, they literally will start doing damage within 15 minutes, sometimes faster. And so you have to detect that. So a lot of times, by the time you get a call from whoever's monitoring your network, they've already done the damage. And so one of the examples that we got from a pretty large carrier is I need somebody to call that will sit there and call all the other carriers to say, hey, I found this, and this is how you found. You need to look for it. But I don't have time, and sometimes I just want to help out. Can NMFTA find that, take on that role? And we're definitely wanting to, because a lot of these bigger companies, they've developed AI software that will help detect the unusual patterns. And someone said you're not trying to find the needle in the haystack. You're trying to find the needle in the pile of needles, which is exactly right. You're trying to find something that's just a little bit out of the ordinary in a space that's extremely ordinary. And it may not be obvious. So you use AI to find it. And once you find it, you've got to definitely take action on it. And, in one case, a carrier in Canada found something and they got a call the next day and said, "Hey, this is in your network." He goes, "Yeah, I know. I've taken care of it." But by that time, it impacted about 300 other carriers. And he said, "Hey, if I would have had somebody to help spread the word, I could have helped. I wish I could have done something." And so that's what we talked about, this kind of fusion center where we just play that neutral party and we help distribute the information because our goal is really to make it safer.
Because you're right, because it's not just a matter of like, oh, we got hacked or we were a victim of some cyber crime. Now we have to like do damage recovery. It's that plus also, how much did they get? You have to assume that they pretty much got everything that they had access to and they got everything in your system because, like you said, they're moving so much. Those criminals and those bad actors are moving so much faster and they're getting more from the time that they have. So it's kind of a matter of like, where do you start to stop the bleeding when you're like when you're bleeding out from the jugular? You got to figure out where to start, how to patch it up, and that I think is half the battle. Because one of the things you mentioned that I was thinking of is how like, okay, this happened to somebody, how would you have prevented it on your own? And I'm sure there's a lot of people that just said, I'm just grateful it didn't happen to me. Like, we didn't have a solution for this. We still don't. And I think that's almost a little bit more terrifying than the actual like attack or the actual like finding out your information's been compromised, because to say like, well, we don't have a plan for how to do this, because it's not a matter of if it's going to happen, it's a matter of when. So the fact that you dodged the bullet the first time doesn't mean that you're going to be so lucky the second time.
Yeah, and that's a theme also. One of the presenters said, "How many people here have been hacked?" And probably about a third of the people raised their hand. And the person beside me works for NMFTA. I said, the other two, and we both looked at each other and said, the other 2/3 are either lying or they're not aware. I don't know which it is, but I think everybody's likely been impacted to some level, right? There's different levels of impact, but at some level, I think everybody has been a victim. It's just really controlling it once it happens.
So for those that, like you said, those who might not know that they've been it or they just aren't aware, those are kind of like the weak links more or less in the supply chain or in kind of an organization, whether it's your software provider, your CRM, you name it. There's so many integrations and connections with so many different people, which makes doing work and day-to-day business so much easier, which we love and we're very grateful for. But the thing is, it's more like what like how do you know, one, if you are a weak link, and two, if you have a weak link in your as part of your network, how do you have that conversation with them to say, we need you to be better because you are bringing us all down right now, because you are the weak link, so we are only as strong as you are. So I could have the best top of the line fantastic data safety, data privacy, I could have everything in like handled on my end, but because I've got Johnny over here who's like, I haven't changed my password in 7 years, then maybe like, how do you kind of address that and have those conversations with the weak links? Is it just kick them out, or is it try to educate them and get them up to speed to be on par with everybody else?
I think it's both. I think, internally you have to have strong policies, like password complexity, password history, how often they have to change their password. That's all things you can do within your group policy. But, one of the things we offer in NMFTA is a vendor checklist. I think that's super important. Um, if you remember, one of the very first hacks I remember is a Target, and it was an AC repairman. He hooked up a laptop, and that laptop had something. Um, and that every vendor can be your weakest link. And so I know for us, we really look at our vendors. And we have a vendor checklist, and that's what we offer on our website is a vendor checklist. And you ask questions like, are you SOC compliant? How often do you pen test? What's the results of your pen test? Can we see the results of your pen test? What do you do to address the reds, the yellows in your pen test? What's your offboarding policy? Ask those really tough questions. I'm a big believer, not just in when I choose a vendor, and this is one of the things we talked about. You're choosing a partner. You're choosing someone that you're really wanting to work with, and so you want someone that not only is cyber aware, but cyber is part of their culture, and that partnership is so critical. I know, we've made some changes in our vendors, and I'm also a big believer in, again, it's a partnership. So you want people that are beside you, but that's one of the stories I know we've talked about in the past couple of years with Estes, and that was a pretty powerful story that they told. Is Todd talked about, hey, I figured out who was a partner and who wasn't. And that was one of the biggest things he said is the calls he got of from his vendors. How can I help? What do you need from me? How can I help you? And those are the ones he said, that I'll always be partners with them. And that's what we want. So I know that's what we encourage. You really want those people that work with you. And I know one person raised their hand and said, well, what if they don't move on? There's someone else that can provide that service. And if that they don't have that mentality, it's kind of like safety. I remember years ago before that became, sort of a mentality and approach. Um, Safety was an afterthought. Then safety became part of your culture. I think cybersecurity is at that same point. It has to be part of your culture. So when you choose a vendor that's cybersecurity is part of their culture. And if not, just move on. It may be the best price, may have a great product, but at the end of the day, if cybersecurity is not as important to them, they can get into your network through that vendor.
And that's something that I think it's because you were talking earlier, like, oh, ask about those pin tests and want to see the results of it. And if you're potentially, because a lot of these contracts and these vendors are not, they're not small, they are not like, oh, I'm going to give you $100 for something. It's usually like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. And so if I'm going to spend this kind of money, I want to make sure that I do have someone that, is there for me when the chips are down, is responsive, because you don't want a situation where, you maybe have a ransomware attack and you're held hostage, you can't access your TMS and you need to do something about it. And you go to call your TMS provider and they say, we'll put in a ticket and we'll be with you as soon as we can. Right. Like that's not the response that at least I would want. If that was me in that situation, I would want to be able to call someone and say, okay, like this is what we've done. Because also at the end of the day, if you have a vendor that, they might have the best deal around, but if they have such a lackadaisical approach to this, obviously they're going to be the weak link. They're going to be potentially how somebody gets in. And if that's the case, like, why are they not protecting themselves? Like, that's more of what I want to know. Like, how are you going to take care of me? You can't even take care of yourself, kind of thing. Like put the oxygen mask on yourself before you help someone else.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And, it's, again, even here, we were on board or looking at onboarding a vendor, and the product team had met with a vendor, and I was like, hey, I want to ask him some cyber questions. So we got on the call, and she hadn't been on a vendor call with me. A lot of people have, but she hadn't. And she sends me a message. She's like, oh, God, she goes, you're killing me. She goes, this poor guy is about to die on this call. And I mean, he couldn't answer a lot, but he just wasn't the right person. And we're going to end up using the vendor. But she calls me afterwards. She goes, that was awful. She goes, that poor guy was almost in tears. I'm like, we have to make sure. I said, somebody could use them. I said, that's our reputation. I go, if somebody, they don't know the difference between our software and their software. And I said,
Yeah.
we have to make sure that they're solid.
And it's one thing if you come across like, because I'm not going to say that every salesperson needs to know every single data security practice that somebody takes. It would be nice, but I understand that that's not necessarily feasible in all of the training. But if you should still have someone who says, I know we do something, but let me put you in contact with someone, with the right person to answer that. Because also, if I were as a salesperson, I'm not the person that handles cybersecurity. I don't know the answer to these questions. I don't want to misspeak something. I'd rather say, you know what? Great question. Let me get the expert and we'll redo this. So that way we can all have a conversation and everybody can be on the same page. Because yeah, like you might get grilled and it might be a really uncomfortable call for you, but at the same time, it's better to ask and know for sure that they have those solutions, that they are taking that seriously, as opposed to asking and them going, what's a pin test? What is that? How do we handle that?
Yeah, and he did in this situation. He did know quite a bit. I was impressed, but you know, again, you've got they're partners, and you're strong as your weakest link. So yeah, go to our website, check out the vendor checklist. Make sure you're asking those questions.
So aside from the vendor checklist and all the fantastic resources you guys have, what do you see kind of happening in the future that is really going to make a huge difference in the cybersecurity space, whether that's on the bad actor side or on those fighting the good fights, trying to stay strong?
Again, I know it's an easy answer, but I think it's AI. So with AI, the bad actors are going to use it, and the only way to combat it is with AI, because they're going to be able to do things better and faster and more efficiently. So the only way to combat that is to do AI, so it can do it better, faster, and more efficiently. So it can start looking for anomalies. It can start learning patterns, and it can find any changes in patterns. And then when you choose your AI vendor, it's just back to the other conversation. Be very cautious with your AI vendors. I think I get an email probably every day with a new AI vendor that I've never heard of. And when that data gets entered into AI, you don't know where it goes. So, making sure that you have strong AI policies so that you protect that data. Like for us, source code could go into AI, legal documentation can go into AI, financials can go into AI. So just making sure that you know where your data is going, how it's getting stored in AI, and having a strong AI policy. And then on the cyber front, making sure that you're utilizing AI to protect your infrastructure, to look for anomalies, and throw alerts when something does happen. But I just think if you don't have an AI policy, that's going to be big. So that's one of the things we're discussing right now is coming up with sort of a guidebook for AI of how do you bring AI into your infrastructure? How do you onboard AI? What are the vendor checklists for AI? I know for us, we monitor what AI is being used, and we want to be cautious of, is a developer putting source code in AI? It has to be enterprise that we pay for. If else, it could go out there and be part of a bigger AI engine that somebody could have access to.
I think that's a really smart point because, why not use the thing that's developed to recognize patterns and find that to find any potential threats or loopholes or, to find an anomaly. It's kind of like it makes it more of a fair fight if it's done properly. That being
Right.
said, we are running out of time today. And Joe, it's time for my favorite part, which is ask Joe an unhinged question. So, what is the most useless superpower you would still be excited to have?
Oh man, now that's different. Um, Useless superpower.
Yeah.
Uh, don't know if it's considered a superpower, but for me, it's the ability to run fast.
Okay. I don't know that that's necessarily like useless. That's pretty handy if you need to go places quickly.
But for me, it would be useless, and the reason being is you miss the journey.
Oh, that's a very insightful answer.
So while it's useful to many, it'd be not useful to me because I there's so much you pick up by not doing that that I wouldn't want to do it.
That's a
So
really
I got more high level. I took the question differently.
Well, I like it. That's the first time we've asked someone that question, and honestly, it's a 10 out of 10 answer. So Joe, if anyone's got any tips on making the journey more exciting, or any roses to stop and smell, or if they have questions about how to best prepare themselves in the world of cybersecurity, where can they find you outside the show?
They can go to nmfta.org. We have cybersecurity links there, or look me up on LinkedIn, or look NMFTA cybersecurity up on LinkedIn, and we'd be happy to help you out.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
You can find Check Call the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, like Apple Podcast and Spotify. Don't forget to check out all the other incredible FreightWaves shows, and don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter on freightwaves.com/checkcall. See you on the internet.